Hi, and welcome to Friday Focus Mental Health Matters. I'm Jane Smith,
And I'm Danielle Dionne.
and we are really excited and honored today because we have a special guest. My niece, Sarah Lentz, is here, and we're going to be talking about science of connectedness and 4 key areas where you can stay connected for your mental health. So we're really excited about it. And a little bit about Sarah. Sarah is so kind, compassionate, and truly a blessing to this world. She is a researcher, she is a spiritual counselor, and an officiant, and she's the owner of Science of Connectedness. In 2018, Sarah graduated from Harvard with a Master of Divinity. Her work through Science of Connectedness is based on the definition of spirituality she developed at UBC and Harvard, which equates spirituality with connectedness. Yeah, I just find it so interesting. I think you can help a lot of people, Sarah, and we are really honored you're here. So welcome.
Thank you for joining us, Sarah. We are so excited to learn more how to take this dialogue and find ways that we can all be connected together. This is such an important conversation, and we are so excited that you're here. Tell us more. What are these 4 pillars? How did this come to be?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. I'm just so excited to talk with both of you and to share more about this not because I'm trying to promote my work, but because I think this is important knowledge that people need to know, and it can help our well-being and make our lives more meaningful. And so it's worked in my own life, and I hope I can help others. So to tell you more about my work, it's hard to even know where to begin, but I was studying psychology in my undergraduate degree, and I became really interested in how our spirituality is related to our mental health and our happiness and our flourishing in life. And when I talk about spirituality, I want to clarify, I'm not talking about Christian spirituality. I'm talking about spirituality in general, and I'll get more into what I mean, but any religion could fit into that, and also beyond religions as well. And so through that, I ended up proposing and publishing, ultimately with the help of a professor, a definition of spirituality, because there wasn't one that really seemed to be broad enough to encapsulate the experience of people who are religious and also the spiritual experiences of people who aren't religious. And so ended up proposing this definition all based on previous research. I kind of compiled it all together. And so started talking about spirituality as connectedness with a capital C. So this connectedness is this feeling of connection to something greater, and talking about how we experience it in these 4 areas. So one is connectedness with ourselves, personal connectedness, and that's knowing who we are as a person, feeling like we have a purpose in life, meaning in life. Maybe you meditate, things like that. Second one is community. Connectedness with community is so important for human well-being and flourishing. But on top of that, being connected to community can also help us feel more spiritually connected in our lives too. And then third is environment. So connectedness with the environment, also very important. Also a lot of research that shows that connectedness with environment helps with our well-being. And then the fourth one is connectedness with our orientation to the transcendent. And so what that means is, for a lot of people, that would be God. It's the way we relate to something that we think is beyond our understanding, something abstract. So yeah, for a lot of people that's God, but for some people that's a universal energy. For some people that's love. For some people that's karma. It's that abstract, can't really define it, something bigger that makes us feel like there is something that makes sense to us in this world, or something that makes sense of the world that we live in. And through that research, that ultimately brought me to Harvard. I worked on that definition while I was there. I spent 3 years studying and working at Harvard and furthered that research. But through that, I really started to think more about this idea that there's physical health, mental health, spiritual health, those 3 things. And to think about those, we know as a society that our physical health is important. Even if we don't actually take care of our bodies, some of us don't, we know it's important. We know we should exercise. We know we should eat healthy, be good to drink lots of water, and mental health, like things that you guys are doing, these talks that you're doing, all like the different organizations that are trying to help with mental health right now, we are learning that mental health is also important. It's so important. And our mental health can affect our physical health can affect our mental health. Those two are connected. I like to add a third one in there. I like to say spiritual health is also that third piece. And what's interesting is spiritual health affects our mental health. Spiritual health affects our physical health. Mental health affects our spiritual health. Like it all is connected. And so when you think of it that way, you take this idea of spirituality as like connectedness with these 4 areas.
I really like
But
those.
what I've found, yeah,
the 4 areas are, I think, just hearing what you're saying there, for me, I'm hearing ourselves, so being present, like with who we are and being connected with our core and our passion and our voice. And then I hear you talking about community, and that's like, how do I serve? Because there's so much power in that. How do I serve the greater good? And then when you talk about the environment, I think about my grounding, like how important it is to look at the soil and dig my feet in those roots and just feel that breath and the air and the wonder. And then when I think about I'm our community, or our orientation, that's what you said. You said that's where God comes in and stuff. And from somebody that's never practiced an organized religion, when I'm hearing you talking about this, untouchable thing, for me, it's hope. It's this idea of hope, and that's something common that all religions really provide, this hope. So I really appreciate these 4 pillars. How do you see these pillars, really all 4 of them, kind of the connectedness of them, helping an individual's mental health?
Right. And so what's interesting is, I'm saying spirituality is connectedness with these 4 pillars. But what's interesting is that when you work on those 4 pillars and you work on having more connectedness in your life, I have found time and time again that people's mental health gets better. So they're not trying to not trying to work on their mental health, they're trying to work on their spiritual health, and yet the mental health just follows right along. And so I honestly think,
I guess what's coming up for me when you said that, like, that we're not actually talking about, wow, my mental health is not well right now, I better go to the doctor, so, find the right therapist and get on the right medication. But what I'm hearing you say is, hold on, instead of going that route, maybe that route, but also there's a new opportunity here to kind of check in with ourselves and see how we are connected to these pillars, because potentially these pillars could have a conflict that is rooted in us that need to be addressed.
And what's interesting is that Sarah, the main reason I wanted to bring Sarah on, and I don't even know if she realizes this, Sarah's my niece, which I said, but I really struggled about 4 years ago, really with depression and dark place. And that's when Sarah was studying this. Maybe it was 5 years, I'm not sure. And I remember when I became aware of these 4 areas, my brain, it almost lit up in the way of like, oh, like, am I connected? Did I lose connection in these areas? Because a lot of time I think people think you need to connect with friends. Oh, make sure during the pandemic and lonely time that we Zoom and connect with friends. But this is different. These are areas when you become aware and you think, did I lose connection with my community? Did I lose connection with a higher power? Or have I not been going outside? Like it changed me. And I don't think you even realized the effect you had on me. And it's so powerful. And that's why I wanted people to be aware of these 4 areas so they can actually consciously say, wait a second, did I lose connection within these areas?
What a responsible prescription, right? Mental health, what a responsible prescription. So instead of, needing to rely on a system to support us, we can look at how we are behaving in our lives and ways of just moving forward to better health. It's really fascinating. And
I have a story about that, actually, if you're interested. So my dad's a family doctor in Canada, and we went to a conference together on spirituality and medicine. And he was medicine side, I was spirituality side. It was a really interesting conference, but while there, we got to talking a lot about my research. And when he went home, he had a very interesting thing happen, which my aunt knows this story as well, which is a patient came in and they were struggling with depression, but it was fairly recent and new. And in talking to this patient, it turns out that they had been on a co-ed sports team of some sort, soccer, something, and their partner had also been on this soccer team. Unfortunately, their partner cheated with another person on the soccer team, and the soccer team chose those two over. This person lost their community, their partner, their community, their outside time, because their exercise time, like all in one, was suddenly not part of any of it.
And they probably
then
lost their faith. They probably lost their faith.
Right.
You feel like,
yeah, like just felt so, so hurt, so betrayed, so everything. And then just wondering why they're depressed, right? So I went to my dad, and my dad went the typical route of what doctors are supposed to do in Canada, which is offer medication, because that is what is recommended for them to do. And I get it. Sometimes people actually have chemical imbalances that need prescriptions. I am not an anti-prescription person. I have a background in psychology. I understand sometimes there's need, but sometimes it seems like we've just lost our connectedness and we need to get that back. Sometimes having the medication helps you get to a place where you're able to get that back too. So I'm not anti-medication. However, this one patient said to my dad, I don't want medication. Give me something else. My dad was like, well, there's this new research coming out of Harvard. And but basically gave a connectedness prescription. It's so funny, Danielle, that you used that language, because that is what my dad did. What we now talk about a lot is actually wrote on a pad of paper, connect with like yourself. So he was like, try meditating, go for a walk outside every day, even if it's just 5 minutes. Find a new community. Maybe it's a book club. Maybe it's, just something that some event in the city that you can go join a knitting class or something. Shows my nerdiness of knitting. But no, like find something else just to even be talking to people, connecting with people. Right. And then the fourth one is like the transcendent is what we call it, is he was a little like, well, were you religious? Are you religious? Do you have a faith in something greater? That's up to you. Leave that one in your court. But let's start with those first three. So the fourth one's tough to talk about.
There must be.
But
did your dad follow up? Because I think that's a big piece in prescription, right? Because often people, right, typically they get medication, and then you have to call the doctor and you talk about how the meds are working.
Yeah.
And I see an opportunity where a doctor could follow up. And so tell me about like how you spent time in nature, or tell me about how you're connecting with your community. I want to hear more. And having that dialogue with the doctor would be so powerful.
Yeah. So what actually happened is it worked so well with this patient that my dad then started talking about connectedness with every single one of his patients, whether they were like that was on antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication. And a year later, we actually presented the research at the same conference that had started the conversation a year before, because everybody felt better. Some people ended up lowering their doses, and most of them lowered or stayed the same, but nobody got worse. And in fact, let me think about this. It's been a few years since I've thought about it. Everybody lowered their dose or didn't have to go on antidepressants, except for the one person who came back a month later and said they hadn't had a chance to try it.
Wow.
And
it's making them aware. When you become aware, you don't think about those 4 areas. You get lost in your brain, in your thoughts. You end up feeling depressed. You feel down. You're in bed. You don't even want to get out of bed. No one says, are you connected? Like, get out and go for a walk in nature. Like, get connected. Like you say, community. Join another team. Join a volleyball team. Join something. Make yourself. Start with one, right? Start with one connect.
Just one thing, one small behavior. And that's where I work. I work more in like the social environmental intervention on behavior. With parents in conflict. And I asked them, like, we have our thoughts and feelings, and Jenny and I always mention this, our thoughts and feelings might not be facts, but our behavior, we can control that. So when I'm hearing you say is your dad prescribing this created an opportunity to think about the behavior that was causing all these reflections. So now new opportunity to behave differently. And then this follow-up in my work, I see parents adjusting their behavior, and they have kids and family members on medication. And over time, when the conflict and the behavior changes, I see the same thing. Oftentimes medication reduces, or they come off medication, and there's new behavioral patterns and habits that create wellness and happiness. So
you know what's interesting is Danielle and Sarah, is for parents to be aware of these 4 connections so that their children, as they are growing up, are connected in these areas. Because right now, especially during the pandemic, so much screen time and things happening, and kids can get down too, and and then the family suffers. So if they're like, okay, we got to make sure that they are connected, even getting them out volunteering in their community, and or outside for nature walk.
Resilience, protective factors to help kids to have the skills of resilience if there's adverse experiences in their lives. So building community and having supported adults in their lives that are, nurturing for them. So these 4 areas are definite ways I think parents can, look at to help kids and themselves change behavior. I wonder if you could tell us, Sarah, more about how to optimize. So we have these 4 areas, and how do we optimize this connectedness? Like, how do we put it into action?
Yeah, so there's a few different things I would say. One is that you don't necessarily need all 4, and that might be a controversial thing to say, but my experience is watching people, everyone tends to be slightly stronger in one area over another. So maybe they're very connected to their community. Maybe they're they feel very connected when they're in nature, and that is the most restoring to them. Maybe they feel the most connected when they are meditating, and that's the most restoring. So there's and sometimes people so I can think of someone with a lot of faith in God, maybe Christian faith specifically, that I think of my sister-in-law actually sometimes is that would probably be her strongest, is that connection with God for her. And so, but for other people, maybe it's, again, love, something else. It's not necessarily that, but that for her is her strongest. And it's different than mine. That's not my strongest by any means.
So what I'm going to say then is optimizing where you feel the most restoration. For my daughter, it's when she's feeling just anxious or whatever, or just not well or disconnected, it's going into the mountains. Like when you said that environmental thing, I immediately thought of my baby girl Dylan, and I was like, wow, I remember early on her dad taking the kids out camping and seeing her, it changed, it relaxed her, these hikes, and now she goes for runs in the mountains with dogs, or she'll go for a walk by herself, and she's so brave out there. It's a whole being that she shines in that environment. And I really, I'm interested to know more about how we everyday people can have conversations about this, or how do we know when somebody is disconnected?
Right. I mean, so I will say just one more thing is that even though we're all stronger in one area, it never hurts to broaden your horizons and encourage those other areas as well, particularly in the pandemic when community wasn't. So say you're really strong in community, but community suddenly isn't really possible. Try to engage those other areas, and maybe by doing all 3 of the other areas, you'll be able to balance out the loss of the community during that time, right?
Well, that makes sense.
Does that make sense? So, so that kind of helps optimize it for people. But then, sorry, Danielle, what was your question?
How do we know when people are disconnected? How do we help? How do we start conversations about this?
I mean, I think it's so often religion has been considered that taboo topic. Don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion, and I think by broadening it to spirituality, that sort of helps, but by broadening that to connectedness, I feel like that opens up the conversation in an easy way where I can talk to my sister-in-law who is, a very devoted Christian, and we can have a conversation about connectedness and spiritual lives, and we don't have to have the same beliefs in any way.
Nice.
Which really helps. So that helps. Another thing is just, I actually think that it can often be obvious when someone's disconnected. Sometimes it's not, but it's hard you don't always know when someone's depressed, but sometimes you can tell when someone doesn't seem as connected. They're not as engaged. They're not responding to text as much. They're not reaching out. They're not giving that, and be able to talk about connectedness, which is such a more general human word, I think makes those conversations a lot easier than even broaching the subject of depression too, right? Hey, are you feeling connected in your life right now? Are you feeling disconnected? It's really easy to be like, I'm feeling disconnected. It's hard to be like, I'm feeling depressed. And so
so interesting. I'm hearing
creates-
disconnection saying, I'm hearing you talk about how disconnection is so much, when you see it, it looks like somebody's struggling with their mental health. So it's almost like this, you know, instead of going to the model of disease and mental health, it's dis-ease, you know, this connection, dis-ease, you're not eased, you're not relaxed. And that's a really profound way of addressing mental health is, hey, what's disconnected about this person and how can we connect them to their greater good in some way, whether it be with the environment, or their community, or their spiritual health. How can we support conversations that way?
Or empower them to create their own connectedness too.
There
Like,
you
how
go.
can we
How
empower
they
them?
get
Well, I think the one barrier to connectedness, really the only one, is it takes active effort. And I feel like if you look back in history, obviously this is a little bit of a rosy glasses analogy, but you look back at history and connectedness was kind of automatically in our societies for a long time. Even you go all the way back to early settlements, that you were connected with the community. You often had a shared faith in something greater. You were outside a lot because we had to get our food, all that kind of stuff. And often a lot of silent time. It's not like there was music or podcasts or TV shows or Netflix to just zone out in front of all the time. It was a lot of silent moments, community moments, environment moments. And then the more and more society has evolved, especially I would say last century, especially in the last even few decades, it is possible, especially this year, the pandemic has basically proved what I've been saying for a few years, is it's possible to not leave your house now. We can have grocery deliveries. We can work from home. We do not have to go outside. We do not have to see other people. You could be a programmer working from home and get everything delivered and literally never talk to a single other person, except for maybe a work-related call. Suddenly, you're not connected in any area anymore. And so it feels a little bit like they're talking about a loneliness epidemic. I think there's a disconnection or epidemic in a way too.
What a fascinating thought.
My God.
There's so much more diagnosis nowadays, and I always wonder if it's because we have more information and people know more about it, so they relate more about it. But I also see it being, you know, people have said, you know, what's going on with parents nowadays? And I've heard arguments about, well, women now are back at work, they should be back at home, or, you know, there's too much stress on families, or they're getting too much information and negative information. You know, families don't go outside anymore because of screens. These are all arguments that, you know, have a spectrum. And I can imagine, you know, your comment of going back in history that far and just seeing where we are now and how ultimately disconnected we are to these areas. It's almost scary.
It is. It's crazy when you think about it. When you put it that way, I was like, I just never thought about that. Like,
me neither.
Yeah, I mean, and to you know, look at it from the other perspective, we're also more connected as a society now than ever before. I can, you know, there are people from all over the world that are part of Peace 360 and connect, right? Like that kind of connectedness is totally there. But remembering to take care of our own connectedness is important.
But
and
Sarah,
it can
so
be forgotten right now.
But you're saying, so like now with things like this, we're connected mentally, like we can be mentally stimulated, we can do Zooms and we can have meetings, but it's more that that inner heart emotional connect that people are losing, because you can't really get that on Zoom. You need to be connected in those 4 areas on a more,
I mean,
it's even like too, right? So I'm hearing the heart and the thinking, but also I'm hearing like this work is action, so behavioral. To reach out to people, to take the courage and build your own connectedness. So that active piece really resonates, that it connects your heart, your mind, and your behavior. Yeah.
And that's the one barrier, is if you can figure out how to make that active effort in your life, the connectedness it becomes a nice self-fulfilling loop where then you're connected and you want to make this. But it's sometimes hard to make that first step. But if you can make it easy, say a 5-minute walk a day, or 2 minutes standing on the porch breathing the fresh air, even just something as small as that can help to restart that system and help you feel better. And
do you know what's interesting?
More.
I don't know if Sarah remembers this, but when I was really struggling in that dark time, I have a dog, thank goodness, and I was so dark in that dark place. I mean, just getting out of bed, but I would take her to the dog park, and I would walk in that dog park, and I would be so happy. I would be so happy. I did never want to leave the dog park. And when Sarah was studying this, I was in the dog park one day and I thought, oh, why am I so happy here? And I looked around, I thought there's community. There's all these people that come together every morning at the same time. They walk together, they share.
And
We're out in
puppies
nature.
and dogs.
We're out in nature. There's trees everywhere. Sometimes the sun would come through and you felt almost a spiritual connection. It was so beautiful. And then I had a purpose. I had my dog. It's something I had to do. I was looking after it. And it connected me in those 4 areas. And I would feel so good. And then I would look at the gate and I'd be like, oh no, I have to go back out to the, and I thought it was like leaving this area where all those 4 connectedness areas that you talk about were there. Is it interesting?
It is so interesting you said that, Jane, because I have a friend of mine that was having a hard time last summer with the pandemic, and really got to a dark place. And neither of us have a dog. We're both downtown Vancouver in condos, and both of us love dogs. And you know where we ended up? Our favorite spot in the summer was the dog beach. We would sit there and watch smiling dogs for hours in the water, and we'd leave there feeling totally rejuvenated. We would get our dog therapy and our, so there's something so special about putting ourselves and behaving and putting ourselves, I guess, in places where we feel joy, right? Yeah. So I like that idea of like, connecting what your experience is and going, hey, if it's just one small thing, you don't have to have a dog. Go to a dog park, like go to places where you see smiles that resonate, and surround yourself with that kind of pleasure.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I would just say as a little aside, I got a puppy in the spring, and through this past year, I have come to strongly believe that dogs and animals that live in our homes with us are part of the community part. Nature, I mean, you go see a deer in the woods or whatever, that would be, I'd say that's probably part of the nature one, but the dogs, they feel that community connectedness too. And so obviously not everyone's in a position to have a dog, but you're right, even just going to a dog park or even, just
looking at dog YouTube videos.
Yeah.
Anything that makes you feel.
Congratulations on your new puppy.
Thank you.
Yeah. What is something that you think policymakers can do? So I hear your dad is a doctor, and he's so brave to start practicing this way. And I mean, I almost want to give his name, but I'm sure he's not accepting new patients right now, because this is the kind of physician that really, I think we need more of that. What can policymakers, what can doctors do? Like, what can people, helpers do?
So I will say my dad is retired, so that unfortunately he's not doing that anymore. But he retired from his original practice. He is actually part of the policy side now. But I do talks to medical communities, and so that's part of it, is just like making sure that these communities are aware, policymakers, doctors are aware that you can have conversations about these sometimes difficult topics by talking about connectedness and these 4 areas. And then honestly trying to build our society in a way, build our laws, build our communities, build our community resources in a way that bolster that connectedness rather than make it more difficult, right? And so trying to think off the top of my head, but
I wonder more about the action of organizing coalitions or partnerships where people say, hey, we want, before you give us pills, we need support to have more connectedness before, and I think in the bigger scale, like, where does the money go? And I think of like all of the pharmaceutical industry and all of this, because there's a lot of pressure for physicians, and there's a lot of pressure for policymakers to abide by those partnerships. And so it's interesting to think about this grassroots idea on how we as a community can call to action, better holistic care.
I mean, one of the examples I could give is just the idea that access to nature is really helpful. And so often you see in lower income neighborhoods, you have less parks, you have less access to nature, it is further to go, it takes more effort. So if city policymakers and government can say, oh, maybe this area should stay apart, maybe this, allowing that. And of course it comes down to a lot of different politics and different ideas, but thinking about who has access to nature
Yeah.
And how are they getting there? And do they have the time to go there? And when, and just, is it safe to go through those areas too?
That's
And
an interesting
keeping all
thought
of
with the
that in
nature, for sure, because I'm
Yeah.
right downtown Vancouver, and in a job I had before, I was a youth counselor, and I used to spend overnights and weekends in a home with 4 teenage girls that were in care. And one day, the whole thing was just keep them home, right? Because when they went to the street, there was trouble. And so keep them home, find something you can do at home with them. So one day I decided we're getting up early, and we went to Walmart, and we all bought like little Dora fishing rods, and like got a bunch of gear together, and I took them out to Bunsen Lake, and we sat on a dock there. And these girls had never experienced fishing, or, well, maybe a little bit in their lives, but it was such a day that I'll never forget, because after that day, the conversation was about that day. Can we go again? Can we, and they didn't have the experience or access because they didn't have cars. They didn't have parents taking them out into the lake, and honest, that is really resonating with me right now as something that was super healing in my experience working there. So powerful.
Wow. That's amazing. And the whole thing is bringing awareness. The only thing you can really do is bring awareness to this.
Yes.
Bring awareness for doctors, physicians, people. That's what you have to do. Keep talking about it, put it out there.
Yeah.
That's why we have you on today, because you're amazing.
So Sarah, what's coming up for you? Like, you've been doing talks with the medical industry. You did your degree at Harvard. You are doing all kinds of work around this. You started your company. What's coming up? How can we get a hold of you? Tell us about what's coming up.
Yeah, that is a great question. So I think my aunt mentioned at the beginning, I own my own company, Science of Connectedness, and you can go to scienceofconnectedness.com. I think, there it is at the bottom. And check it out. It has a lot of information about research-based, I call them spiritual tools, also more information about my definition. I do private, I call it spiritual counseling. It's like, I joke, it's like talking with a friendly pastor with no theological restrictions. Like, you believe in anything, no judgment. We're going to talk about what works for you in your life. And then on top of that, I also do, will work people through the connectedness framework of how do we support this more in your life? What can you try? What were you doing in the past? What are you not doing right now that you used to do? Or what are you doing right now that's working? How do we increase that and make it better in the future?
So Sarah, you do virtual, you're doing virtual working with people, the spiritual.
Generally, I would love it to be in person, but between the pandemic and the fact that my clients are all over the world, it ends up being more virtual, but it doesn't it's virtual, but then they're doing the connectedness and the connecting in their communities and in their hometowns. So that works.
Okay, and people can find
being interested in learning more of your inquiry skills. They're going live soon and going to be talking to folks that call in, and we're mobilizing conversations forward to taking next steps and creating goals of behavior that can put action items on the table for wellness. So I can imagine that your talk to our team would be so helpful in the learning.
Yeah, well, anything I can do to help support. I love giving talks to organizations and whatnot to just make sure this is more known. I just feel like the more people that know about this, the healthier society will be. And so
it's true. That's
my goal. And then I will say one quick thing is that as part of Science of Connectedness, a little branch off, I'm starting a podcast based on all of this research. It should be launching sometime in the next month. I'm very excited. That will be called Connected Collective. But you can go to scienceofconnectedness.com. I will post about that on there when it is launched. So thank you so much for having me on here today.
So people can go, we'll put your website in the comments so people can actually click on it, the Science of Connectedness, and they can find you there if they want to reach out. Right. And then we have your podcast coming soon. So that's exciting. Thank you so much, Sarah. Honestly, it's been amazing. You have so much value. And I really believe that anyone watching this, that if they are in a place, especially with the pandemic and what's happening, if they are even in beginning to feel low, like not in a deep depression, if they feel like did I lose connection in one or two of those areas? And maybe they don't have to get to such a deep place. They can take what you said, and like, I'm going to reconnect and go out more, get involved in my community, something. So I think people just need to hear one thing that can change their life. And I appreciate you so much coming on.
Oh,
You're amazing.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for providing this opportunity for us to talk to you, and also for sharing your amazing work. Our goal here is just to show folks that there is other resources out there, and that when we talk about mental health, it matters. And thank you so much for showing up today. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks everyone for watching. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, Danielle. Bye.